I'm going to take you back through repainting the sky, doing a little bit more undergrowth and a few hand painting tips along the way. And of course, the exterior of this cabinet needs finishing. I've got a couple of nice ideas for that. So let's take a closer look at the actual cabinet. Okay, a couple of things that I'm going to address at this stage is this was a stage piece and it was done in probably 3/4 of an hour. The paper went on, it took me a little while to get the paper on, so 15 minutes, and the paint work, which you see up here and down below, was done in less than 30 minutes. One of the things that happened on stage was out of speed, the paper was longer, I wrapped it round the edge of the door. Now that's a little bit rough. I'm going to take away with some sandpaper, clean that up so the door fits nicely back into the carcass of the piece. The other thing which you will have seen on the close-ups just now is you can see the connection. Now I did fray the edge with a damp brush of the paper to get a kind of wiggly line. It's wiggly but straight, if that makes sense. And I put lots of infuser underneath and over the top and spread this all out, and then I went straight into paintwork. Now I believe this line is showing because of the mix of infuser and paint together. It wouldn't normally do this if you'd leave it to dry. There's a few little fibres because I was working at speed, which I'm going to slightly sand down, and then I'm going to go back in with some paint, add a little bit of texture. I'm going to use this cloud formation as my guide because I quite like how this looks, but we are going to repaint the whole thing once again. So in with these little bits of prep work first, and then we can move forward to the creative bit. Here I am going back in with the sky, a colour mix of Greek blue and old white. Notice I'm using the brush in an any what way fashion just to add a little bit of texture. I'm also using my atomizer just to get a really good blend. You also might notice that I've gone over the tree line and the beak of the bird, and I'm using a cloth just to remove any excess paint that I don't want in that area. So here we have it. The background is now dry. Now, if this was you working from the beginning, I would say go in with either Louis blue and old white. I've been using Greek blue and mixing slightly more old white into it to get that sort of sky blue. You can still see some of the existing clouds that I put in originally, but we're going to go back over them in a moment. One thing that I would say is to get really good perspective on sky, colours fade away in distance. So where I've met this tree line here, I've allowed it to be slightly more white. you may notice that I've actually gone over the beak of the bird and one or two of these rushes, which we're going to go back in and put them in as the final detail. Also, to get a really good cloud, I would go with a mix of old white for the lightness, a touch of French linen, because light passing through clouds, you can kind of get those lovely sort of moody clouds, which would sit slightly underneath the clouds, and maybe a touch of graphite mixed with your Greek blue again, just to add that deep moody, and then go back in with some highlights of old white on the top surface of the clouds. Try and remember where your light source is coming from. I'm imagining mine coming from this way, so the clouds will be slightly lighter on this side, here and there. And of course, back to perspective, they need to gradually, as they come further away, deeper into the distance, they're going to get smaller and less and much lighter blended into the background, if that makes sense. So let's get stuck in with placing some clouds onto this background. Okay, let's paint some clouds. I'm going to talk you through this the best that I can at this speed. So I've gone in with old white and a touch of French linen. Notice that I've added some graphite underneath each cloud as some dimension. And I'm going with my brush in any what way, dots and dashes really. And I'm also using a touch of water from my atomizer with a dry synthetic brush just to spread around those clouds. Again, any what way, it will help them spread the paint around and make them look a little softer. Then repeat this process a couple of times using the French linen and old white. Notice that I'm using the old white to the upper parts of the clouds. I'm planning my light direction coming in from the left hand side, so that's why I'm popping the light on the top of the clouds to the left of each cloud, if that makes sense. As you can see, just little highlights, dots and dashes, and the dry synthetic brush just to soften everything off. So now I'm going to address the lower half. The paper ends around about this section, which is why I put the dark green in, and then I've added pond lilies and some rushes, kind of to look a little bit like irises, flag irises here to the sides. As you can see, I rushed this pretty quick. There's no high and low light to any of these sort of grasses at the bottom. So we're going to add some high and low lights. I'm going to touch up some of these pond lilies as well. They were just little slashes with the brush. I quite like them. The way that they look kind of looks quite innocent, and I think it works quite well. But I'm just going to add a touch of high and low light. And the colours that I'm using is Amsterdam Green and Furl. There will be a constant mix of the two. This is what happened in some of these pond lilies. You can see here, there's a little bit of a highlight. That's the Furl. So it's the light catching the leaves. To create the look of pond lilies, I'm using a colour mix of Amsterdam Green and Furl for some highlights. This is a colour that I'm going to be using quite a lot in the foreground. I want the colours to be much sharper. So as you can see, I'm going up in some of these reeds and rushes, going over the top of my pond lilies just to push them into the distance once again. Now, I put a suggestion of a flag iris here and here on the edges, a few places. I'm going to try and pep them up with a bit more yellow. I'm going to use a bit of English yellow, maybe a touch of Amsterdam Green in there just to dull it down, because I have no idea how this is going to come out. So from the centre, out of there, and then kind of a bit bigger, kind of adding a more of a suggestion of a sort of a flag iris type flower. I've not really studied what an iris looks like, but I'm kind of thinking of sort of 5 sort of petals. Just here and there, a little bit of yellow. We'll maybe go into the centre of these and dull them down. That yellow, again, it's a bit feisty. It's pushing all of the darkness into the background, which I quite like. I think it kind of suits it. Got 3 there. Maybe I've put some yellow here, so maybe just a touch of one here. Let's pop some sort of darker green into the centre. Amsterdam. just to dull that down a little bit. They would have probably black veins, probably. Just to kind of make them look a little bit more obscure. Takes the edge off them being so crisp. Yeah, the yellow just adds something. Right, I will go in and put a darker centre, I think. We'll grab, oh, in fact, we'll do it now. We've got graphite. Let's clean this brush up a little bit. And kind of put a few little suggestions of sort of as you can see here, I'm painting a flag iris in the foreground. I thought I was being really clever just painting these irises without any reference whatsoever. And as I went through the process, I decided that I really didn't like what I was painting, even though it probably looks quite good on camera at this moment. So I decided just to blend everything away with some water and allow everything to trickle down. So again, more of a suggestion of an iris being there. I felt right at the time, and watching the paint drip down, it looked perfect. So I thought I'd leave this to dry and go back over with some more leaves just to bed them into the background to see how that would look. I'm just addressing the pond lilies. Now, again, it's just a suggestion of something being there. So what I'm using is a little bit of French linen because I don't want it to be white. You imagine pond lilies to be white and pink, but white is going to be too stark. I've added touches of white here and there, but probably a little bit too much. So in with a touch of burgundy sort of in the middle, and then a little flick of French linen, which will ultimately just be the right sort of shade. We'll pop a little bit of burgundy in there, a little bit of burgundy here and there, not too much burgundy because it's a strong colour, and then we're going to go in with the French linen and just kind of create some petals, kind of pull them up, fan them out, like so. Just adds the right sort of shade of pink. And then what we're going to do is, that feels quite good. This one looks kind of a bit spiky, but hey ho. Kind of make it a little bit less spiky. And then we're going to go in with a little bit of what we got here, a little bit of underneath. We're going to use a little bit of, we'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix Oxford Navy with strange combo, Oxford Navy and Enfleur together, just to add a darkness to underneath each one. I'm going to make that a little bit watery. It's kind of a dirgy colour, which just play around that a little bit. Yeah, it's got that pinky purpley vibe. I'm tapping that in with my finger just to smudge it around, just to bed it in underneath. That's too heavy. And then I'm going to go back in, clean my brush off, back in with the French linen again. As a little bit of a petal going over, just so it overlaps. So you don't have those harsh lines. There we go, so they look a little bit more pond lily. That one's supposed to be a bud, but hey ho, might be a bit big. A little bit more French linen here to this one, the odd leaf. Quite right angles. And they've already got some yellow deep down in there. Let's just tap a little bit more yellow in there. There's a couple of little dots just in the centre. Should add a little touch in there. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Smudge that around a little bit underneath. Just adding that dark, shadowy stuff underneath each one. So now I'm going to address the beak that's now missing, or kind of under the sky. So we're going to add that in. We're going to add the rushes in over the top, maybe even add another one that goes a bit further and up over the cloud up here. And we're going to add lights coming in this way, remember. So we're going to add a little bit of lightness to the bird just on the top edge here and there, just to bring back a few of those feathers. And we're going to use old white and French linen again, and just tickle the surface really. We're just going to add that little bit of whiteness to the bird. It's kind of a feathery. I've got my cloth, so I'm going to offload some paint, and it's just going to be a tickle to begin with. See how that works. So we're going to go in over its head, follow the line. We can just see it in there, a little bit lighter, just at this front edge. This will give a more hand-painted feel to the whole decoupage project. Just a little tickle here and there. That's where the light is catching the bird's forehead, so to speak. We're going to smudge that in. A few little feathers. Can you see it's just kind of looking a little bit more feathery? This brush, if you look, it's kind of quite worn, kind of bristly almost. Right from its eye. A little bit underneath the beak. Not too much because it would have shadow there. Above the beak. We can touch its eye back in if we need to. And then some, just a little bit down the front of its breast there. Just think the light's coming this way. That feels good. A little touch more lighter, just on the front. I like it. And then down the front of its neck, just the odd highlight. Using the finger just to highlight the bird a little bit. We're going to do a bit on its back plume here. And down, I'm going to just do a few little strikes. I might just spritz this a little tiny spritz, not much, because we don't want it to move around too much, the paint. It's just giving it that little bit of those feathers, a little bit more highlight. I can see where I originally put the highlights, so that's quite nice. I can follow them. Not so much at the back because that would not, it's in the shadow at the back. That's just adding a little bit more sort of hand-painted feel to it. Don't want to take all of the paper away, but it's just enough to give it that lovely hand-painted feel. Go around its eye. On the top of it. A little bit more feathery. And there we go. So you can see it's really adding a bit of depth. We lost a little bit of the detail in printing with this paper, but it's still there, you can see it and you can follow it. That's just brought that bird a little bit more to the front again. Now we're going to go in, mix up a little bit of Barcelona orange and with Enfleur, so it's a dark orangey beak, and pop the beak back in. Also, we might be able to get away with those two colours for here and here. So I'm using a rigger brush. It's got a really long but thin tip, so this should help carry the paint. Again, I've added water to the chalk paint, just a spritz with my atomizer, just to loosen the paint. I'm offloading some of the material on the brush, just so it's not too thick. Straight in with that line. Still a little bit dry, the paint, because it's kind of, chalk paint sticks to chalk paint, so remember you do need a certain amount of moisture in the paint to be able to get it to travel. And that feels good. So that's the top half of the beak in. See how that now stands out from the background? We're just going to add underneath a little bit more Enfleur rather than the Barcelona orange. So another mix. So it's a bit darker. I'm going to come in about halfway. Follow my original lines. That feels good. Paint his beak back in. It looks so much more different. with the beak back in. Simple as that. I will touch the eye back in as well. I think we'll go in with a little bit of Athenian black just to really sharpen the eye up. Up here we have some rushes, so I'm going to add the rushes back in. It's the same sort of colour palette, so whilst we're there, we're going to go in with the Enfleur mix. I'm going to go right the way back down with a stalk. There's another one here. Just put those back in. And I think what I'm going to do, that travels up and into there, so we will add its plumes. We're going to put another one right the way up here. We're going to come right the way down. So we're going to go right up here. One fell swoop. Just to pass it through the cloud area. Offload, there's a bit too much paint on the brush, I can tell. But it's a bit more solid on Fleur down here, behind the bird. That feels really nice. And then what we're going to do is do some sort of dabby Barcelona orange with a different brush. In fact, that really poorly brush, we'll clean that one off and we'll use that again. I'm just going to add some sort of plumes. So we're going sort of like in a triangle shape. Say a triangle, sort of a point. Like so. Up here, like a spear shape, just dabbing. Let some of the sky come through. There's a little one in here. Feels good. Now we're going to go in with a bit of the Enfleur mix. Just as a highlight, just pick up in the centre. Here and there. Touch more. Just going over where I've just been and adding a few extra little dots. And that should be about it. So now the sky recedes behind the rushes. I really think that one is a triumph, that extra one at the top. Stretching the picture out. I'm going to do one more here. I feel like I've got one more to put in. A little bit of Barcelona orange on this side. Again, light coming in. Now the darker colour sitting on the other side. Again, suggestions of something there like seed heads. And they're only tappy dots. That autumnal sort of shade. I'm happy with that. What I might do is just give it a slight wash over the top with some white, but don't panic, I'll show you how that works once this is dried. So just to bed them in, I'm gonna do, I said a whitewash, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna use a little bit of dry brushing. So I've loaded up the very end of my brush with a little bit of old white. I'm gonna pick up my rag and offload the brush really a lot. Load it up and offload. So we've just got a little bit of paint in there and we're just gonna tickle over, kind of dry brush over, and it will add a smokiness. Circular motions, it just pushes that back a little bit into the distance again. Can you see it's softening the overall look of them as if the light's catching them. So not as harsh on colour now. And the stems, because the light would catch all of this. So that's just about all of the artwork complete over the decoupage paper. It was relatively simple. I hope that you got something from that. As you can see, I am not a formally trained artist, even though I painted this. Most of my artwork is all about the suggestion of a little flick of a brush here, or some stippling, or even with the sky, kind of dry brushing over, or wet brushing over the sky to create those lovely clouds. What is key is colour. Colour is always key to getting really wonderful artwork. And as you can see, marrying the colours into the decoupage paper really helps. So all that's left to do now is think about a colour to go on the outside of this cabinet. Now, originally I was thinking, let's go for something really punchy like Barcelona orange. There's lots of blues and greens in there, so it would contrast quite well. But I really feel that this needs a dark colour on the outside of the carcass just to draw your eye into that wonderful piece of artwork in the middle. So I'm thinking it could be either Oxford Navy, Amsterdam Green, or Graphite, or Athenian Black. I haven't yet thought about that, but today is just about drawing to an end. So I am gonna rest this evening. You won't see me resting. It will be a new day tomorrow when I start painting the outside of this cabinet. Please stay with me because I've got something really interesting to show you. Along the sides, I think we're gonna add a little bit of pattern. I think pattern would be really good on the edges of those two runs. So I'll see you in the morning. So I'm now on day 2 of my project. I've stepped away for at least 12 hours and come back into the workshop this morning, and I feel like it's pretty good. I was a little bit disgruntled about this area last night, but the more I look at it, the more it feels right. I am gonna kind of blend it in with a little bit of dark wax, I think. So first up, we're gonna give this whole panel a coat of clear wax. This will protect it whilst we're working on the other sections of the wardrobe. If we have an accident, it means we'll be able to wipe clean. So I'm gonna add some clear wax to the whole surface, and then just where this bit gets a little bit darker, I'm gonna pep it up with some dark wax at the bottom. Also, whilst I've been away from the piece, I realized that there's some sections at the top that look a little bit crude and raw. Up here, I'm gonna add some Would You Bend moulding, which is one of my mouldings. It's just a flat half round, just to carry on this beadwork along the top. And there's a rough old piece at the bottom, which I'm gonna disguise with the same beadwork. I'm gonna do that on fast play, guys. You probably all have seen how to apply a would you bend to a piece of furniture. So I'll just do that on fast play once we've got the wax on, and I'm happy with that, and then we can move on to the exciting paintwork around the edges. So just before I start adding the wood you bend, I thought I'd show you what the issues are. So as you can see here, this was quite crudely made. There is a funny edge. It just, to me, does absolutely nothing for the piece. It's been poorly painted in its past, not by me. But I feel that this section of trim needs to carry on along that way, so it kind of ends it off. There's another little bit at the bottom which I'm going to do as well. The trim that I'm going to use is 724 Wood You Bend. Now this is one of mine. I was really keen to bring just a plain trim which looks like this. It's a half round. There's a little piece of it. A half round, very simple. It is fractionally smaller than this trim, not by a lot. It's pretty close. So how I'm going to tackle this is a wooden trim that came with the piece of furniture. I'm just going to take that off on a 45-degree angle, cut my trim to length, 45-degree angle, and into that corner so it has a nice 45. And then because this trim goes rounded, I'm just going to end it squarely at the end. And I'm going to do the same to the bottom, heading towards the door. There is two pieces of wood and there's a crack between it, and it doesn't look very pretty, so I'm going to do that all the way around just to kind of finish this edge off. Okay, with much deliberation, I've decided to go with Annie Sloan Oxford Navy for the surrounds of this cabinet. The reason that I'm going with the chalk paint is because this surface was painted probably twice, once with gloss, then once with, I think it's emulsion actually. I've given it a scuff sand, as you can see, to remove anything that's too bumpy and lumpy, but this will stick to absolutely anything. I would have loved to have gone with satin paint for a more sheer finish, but unfortunately there's a lot of texture going on that surface, so I'm going to use chalk paint, and I am going to allow it to have a little bit of texture so it kind of looks a little bit like velvet in its finish. So let's get applying the first coat of Oxford Navy and see how it looks with the beautiful image in the middle. Okay guys, at this stage, it's about finessing the whole piece of furniture. I've come to a point where I know that I need to add some detail. I'm not quite sure which direction I'm going to go in, but I'm going to talk that through with you guys. So I've got the Oxford Navy. I know that I want to add some metallic detail to here, so I'm going to use a stencil. I've made that choice. That has been simple for me. I'm using this beautiful stencil by Barleycorn Vintage. It's a good friend of mine, Denise, in Australia. I've used it before and it's a gorgeous 1930s kind of deco inspired stencil, which I think will look great in this aperture all the way down in that little square that we created. I have got to cut this stencil down so it fits in, only a small slive off one edge. I'm going to try and take it off this edge so it butts closer to the sides. The other thing is I wanted to use a metallic. Now metallics, if you're using a metallic paint, I would use it straight over the dry chalk paint and give it good drying time before going over with a wax finish. But I've decided for a more subtle finish, I'm going to go in straight with my clear wax, and then I'm going to use one of Annie Sloane's gilding waxes. Now, these will go over a wax finish and they'll look fabulous, and they work beautifully through stencils. I've got a few choices, copper, and I've got dark silver, which I think is being discontinued, which is a shame, but there is a light silver as well, or just a silver. And I've got bright gold, which my heart of heart says bright gold, although I know that both of these would look absolutely amazing with this. I suppose it's just about taste really, and your market, who are you selling this to? So I think that I cannot resist a bit of gold, which I will add to the key escutcheon, and I will also add a little bit of bright gold back to the hinges to bring them back to life. They were covered in lots of different layers of paint. You could strip them off, you could undo them, strip them off, fix them up, but this is a good quick fix, and once it's polished in, it looks just as good as original. The other thing that I would say at this point is I've been looking at this and pondering for quite a while. Again, the top of this, it ends, and I do quite like plain, but it ends with nothingness, and there's lots of blue here and here. So I'm thinking, could I add another Would You Ben moulding? And this is one that I pulled out, just kind of simple. And I'm not sure whether I'll add it to the top. I'm thinking just like that. Many of you guys will say, yes, do it. For me, probably no. I haven't yet decided. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint this out in Oxford Navy. I'm gonna heat it up, slightly curve it so it fits nice and snug, and then just rest it on top and see what I think. What's beautiful about this is the cutouts. If it's painted, pre-painted and then stuck on, all of the light blue will be seen in the gaps. So I think it could be quite amazing. I'm not sure yet. So on with the waxing. I'm gonna lay this down on the flat to use my stencil. Now, normally I would use a tack spray on the back of the stencil so it doesn't shift whilst using it. I don't think that will be very good with the wax finish, so I'm gonna have to be super careful when using my gilding wax through the stencil. As you may have noticed, I decided to go with copper and a touch of gold through my stencil, just in a random fashion. I really love how the copper stands out against the Oxford navy. Also, once I stood the piece up, I decided that there was just too much plainness going on that bottom plinth. I went in with some masking tape to create some stripes and did the same thing again with my gilding wax. Also, you may see I'm adding the Would You Bend moulding. I wasn't going to put this on, and then when I saw all of the pattern, decided it was very much needed in the centre. The final thing that I decided to do to complete the whole look was to use my gilding wax on the new Would You Bend trim at the top, and then the existing trim all the way around the stencil design, just to make everything pop out really beautiful. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's tutorial. I know it was another long one, and this one was halfway through, so I don't know what it would have been like if I'd started it from the beginning, but I hope that you will have taken something away from this tutorial, whether it be hand painting or gilding, whatever it may be. I hope you've enjoyed my journey on this piece of furniture. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe and notifications bell for future projects. I'll catch you all next time.